Right. Morning, everyone, except only Kate is here. Morning, Kate. So, guys, in terms of what you've received, this is on ARC. I don't need to remind you about this being on ARC. I think we've moved beyond the point that people don't know that things are on ARC. You'll see that there are two separate documents. If you're doing quantitative, you're using this document. It's obvious because it says quantitative on it. If you are doing qualitative, you will go and default to the qualitative document. I will work through the qualitative document, but where I need to feed in the quantitative bits where there is a bit of a variation, I'll do that. Right. So, in terms of just making sure that we maintain the golden thread, I've read a couple of documents in the recent past where people are doing qualitative and they talk about validity and reliability and those kinds of things. Obviously, we now need to get that right. If you're doing qualitative, it's trustworthiness. So, make sure that your terminology is 100% right. What is nice about this slide, it gives us what we call our golden thread. That golden thread tells us what to expect in terms of our general style and approach, and specifically the methodologies that we use and how we use those methodologies. So the title at this stage, I think everyone has their title sorted. I'm a little bit concerned that some people didn't have their title yesterday. That is deeply concerned because we've had an entire year to do this. Key in terms of the title, if you're doing qualitative, and we want to keep this very, very simple, you will start your title sentence with exploring, and then look at whatever you're exploring the role of whatever. If you're doing quantitative, you'll either do explaining or describing, and remember to put in your two variables. I know that some of you will not do this, but those of you that want the extra marks, remember that eye-catching, attention-catching short phrase before you start the exploring. But I'm not going to get overboard. If you've got a title, if you've got feedback on your title, that is what you're using at this stage. So insofar as the background is concerned, there are a couple of things that we need to be concerned about. Again, you would have received feedback on your previous submissions. So insofar as the background is concerned, the first one is essentially telling us why this is important. So we expect some sort of attention-grabbing opening sentence. From that opening sentence, transitioning into your background. So attention-grabbing transition sentence where you clarify what you mean by that opening sentence, and then you move into the actual background. Key in terms of this background is to give me the numbers, stats, and facts that will highlight why this is an issue that we need to pay attention in terms of this research. So the key bit would be getting those specific stats from reliable sources, those specific numbers, whether they are newspaper headlines, to show us that there is this need, that there is a set of circumstances that exist that have contributed to this need. Again, at this stage, you would have received feedback on your previous submissions. It is simply to copy that into your final document. Your problem statement, and we've spoken about this multiple times, the key thing in terms of the problem statement is if you do not have a problem to solve, you do not have research. So in terms of the problem statement, you'll remember we talk about this as being the ideal. So part A, what the desired goal is, what your problem would look like once it's been effectively dealt with. Part B is the reality in terms of where we are now. So it is the deficiency. And then part C is where you tell me what you're going to do in this research to remedy this problem. Key in terms of that, guys, it is not giving me solutions to the problem. It is telling me that in this research, I'll be adopting a qualitative approach using semi-structured, open-ended interviews with subject matter experts to make a set of recommendations, or to hopefully make a set of recommendations on how to deal with the problem. If you do not do part A and C, what is important is part B. Part B is the deficiency. It is the gap between what we expect and what should be. In terms of this particular deficiency, in terms of this particular gap, please remember to write it as a problem. Don't tell me solutions, and at this point, write it as a problem and support it with evidence from literature. So you need a few references to support that this problem is real. Insofar as relevance is concerned, it really answers the question, why is this such a burning issue in society? And remember, guys, it is the idea that when we will do this research and when we arrive at solutions, it is worth researching it because it can contribute to a change in policy, a change in practice, and a change in decision making. The way I always look at this, and highlighting the importance of the relevance, is to ask the question, what would happen if I left this problem alone? If the answer is significant, if the consequences are severe, then obviously your focus is to highlight that. And it's about then deficiencies in policy practice and decision making that we are going to look at addressing into the future. Insofar as the qualitative studies, and I'll switch to quantitative here in a second, insofar as the qualitative studies are concerned, remember your research question would be the overarching question. That overarching question would be that single broadest question you can ask about this particular bit of research. You can only ask what and how questions. I do not want to see a why question anyway, whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative, but you can maybe get away with quantitative, but here it is what and how questions. In terms of the research questions, your overarching question, what I have done is helped a little bit in terms of giving a little bit of an example of what potentially a research question could look like. Once you've got your main overarching question, you need sub-questions. Do not stretch beyond 3 sub-questions. In terms of those sub-questions, remember, they're also what and how questions, but I would, if you are doing research into cryptocurrency and mining cryptocurrency, I would look at issues around the process of that, the cost of electricity, the security of the cryptocurrency, the risks associated with it as your sub-questions. Insofar as your quantitative research is concerned, to just jump ahead to that, so far all the same, I want one single question. And the way you phrase this question, if you're doing quantitative research, is what is the relationship between? And you give me your independent and your dependent variable. Don't get clever, don't get smart, don't get carried away with trying to actually impress. It is a simple question, one question. What is the relationship between the two variables? And obviously, I'm talking to very few people in terms of that. Right. So from a qualitative research perspective, and we've done this multiple times, and I'm still seeing the mistakes being made here. Now, again, some people are going to accuse me of over teaching, but the reality is some of you a day before the second to last submission were still making this mistake. So I just need to open my paint. And my apologies for what you're about to see, because I'm drawing with a mouse. So you would have your overarching question for qualitative. You would have your sub-questions for qualitative. Those sub-questions become your research objectives. So those sub-questions become your different research objectives. Right. Insofar as the research objectives are concerned, write it as an objective, but remember, they will all be exploring. So you'll just go exploring the role of electricity use in mining for cryptocurrency, if that was one of your sub-questions. So your focus is very much on making all of the objectives starting with the word exploring. In terms of quantitative research, you will have your single question at the top, and then you would have your 2 hypotheses. You'd have your alternative and your null hypothesis. The null hypothesis suggesting no relationship, the alternative hypothesis suggesting a very, very clear relationship. So In terms of that, your sub-questions will translate into your research objectives, and just start your research objectives by writing exploring. Insofar as quantitative research is concerned, your question will then translate into your quantitative hypotheses. Your hypotheses, your null and your alternate. Null, as I said, no relationship. Alternate shows a relationship. And just simply use the research question. So what is the relationship between alcohol consumption and drunk driving? Your null hypothesis, there's no relationship between alcohol and drunk driving, or there is a relationship, a positive relationship. Right. Insofar as your literature review is concerned, my suggestion is make the main heading literature review, and then from there have as your first subheading theoretical foundation. Please, in terms of your literature review, I do not want to see headings on headings. So tell me what the literature review is, and then tell me that in this literature review, I will be attending to the theoretical foundation, a review of literature, and then I will also be attending to providing a conceptualization, a set of concepts. Your theoretical foundation, that should be sorted at this stage. We've spoken extensively about how to write the theoretical foundation. There are three components to the theoretical foundation. The first one is the theory in its original format. The second component would be updated views on this theory. And the third component would be the relevance of this theory to your research. Would be the relevance of this theory to your research. So remember those three components. You have to have them. The theory in its original format, using your original author, using the original references, updated views, and then obviously indicating why this theory is relevant. It applies to both quantitative and qualitative. Insofar as your literature review is concerned, at this point, you should have done your literature review. You should have arrived at a series of themes. Remember, at least have 3, 4, 5 themes. I think there's not much we can do at this point. The key thing in terms of the literature review is that each theme will have its own set of authors. Do not use one author repeatedly in a paragraph, because that is a summary. It is not a critical discussion. So it is an integrated set of arguments that you're using to build an argument around that particular theme. Okay, so no drama there. Conceptualization would be those specific definitions that we require in order to effectively understand this bit of research. In order to effectively read your research document, these are the non-negotiables in terms of your definitions. Please make sure that you provide me an academic definition. Do not use stupid references like encyclopedias or those kinds of things. Use academic references. Please also, in terms of this, give me the definition and then define it within the context of your actual research. So there are two components to each of these concepts. The first one is the definition in its pure form, and then just the second component with a reference, contextualizing it in terms of your own research. Right, so your conceptualization is there. Right, now the paradigms. Please remember the golden thread in terms of the paradigms. You now all should know that you're doing interpretivist or positivist. I think definitely, I know Musa is doing positivist, but I think some people have moved across to quantitative research, so they will also have a positivist paradigm. But the rest of you are all interpretivist. Please start by explaining what a paradigm is. A paradigm frames our thinking about certain topics, certain subjects. It indicates the kind of views and beliefs we hold about certain subject matter, right? So essentially, they define the world at a particular point in time around particular issues. Sorry, guys, I'm just grabbing some water. So in terms of the paradigm, we have two paradigms. Yeah, positivism. I am in the quantitative document. So positivists believe in objectivity, believe in a single reality. Remember my example of the car accident. If you have a car accident, the accident investigator that arrives and measures how long the skid marks were on the tar, works out reaction time. Those are single realities. Insofar as interpretivism, it is about multiple realities. So these slides are important because these are things that indicate to us what you need to be writing as part of that particular paradigm. Insofar as the qualitative paradigm is concerned, need to just jump ahead here quickly. Again, very clear indication. It is interpretivism, no single reality. Those would be the witnesses who observed the accident. If you have 10 witnesses, I can tell you now, each would have their own interpretation of what happened in that accident. And it's about viewing the world from our experiences, noting our concerns, noting our biases, etc. At no point do we suggest that this is going to be objective research. We highlight the fact that we'll be interpreting subjectively, although the aim is to always represent what those individuals who we had interviewed, those research participants, had shared with us. Sorry, guys, I've got a bit of a flu. Right. And then in terms of your research paradigm, 2 lines each. Ontology, what it is, and the ontology as it relates to your particular bit of research. So you'll see that there are very clear definitions. For me, my favorite slide in this is this one here. You cannot go wrong when you use this slide. Define ontology, epistemology, axiology. That's enough for me. And then here it tells you from a positivist perspective, the kinds of terminologies you would use. From an interpretivist perspective, that is what you would be writing. Please reference this. I don't provide references. You can go look for your own references. So you will describe what a paradigm is. You'll describe your own paradigm as interpretivist or positivist, and then you'll tell me what ontology, epistemology, and axiology actually refers to in terms of your paradigm. Guys, this one is also important, this slide. So you can see here, there is your positivist approach, if you want to steal some words from there, and there is the interpretivist approach, if you want. You're not going to wander beyond that. Right? I've given lots of examples on how to write these. There is no excuse to leave these out. Yesterday, I was still finding people showing me documents that had none of those 3 elements in. We shouldn't be doing it at this point. Right. This is the one that is driving me insane in terms of the pre-reading. And my problem is when I look at the people on the call, none of the people that have to be here are here. And my apologies, ladies, I'm having a moment, but it's not at the people who are attending here. These are your population slides. Start with describing the overall population. Tell me what the population is. Describe your population. From there, you'll talk about your population parameters. You will then start discussing your target population and your accessible population. These are slides 27, 28, and 29. That is the layout of the specifics that I require from a population perspective. Please also keep referring to those sample reports that I've given you. Jackie Grant is very, very good. She does this incredibly well for the interpretivists. Bradley Smith, his for the quantitative people, really good to tell you what fits under the different headings. Right. And then we go to research design. Your research design, if you are doing an interpretivist or if you're adopting an interpretivist approach, will always be qualitative research. And describe what qualitative research is, guys. I tell you exactly what it is. I give you the slide. You literally have to just write it from the slides. And again, I'm not having a go at the people sitting on this call with me because you guys have done this right. Okay. So in terms of interpretivism, just to take it a step further, you will talk about your size of your population, which will be smaller, not 20, 30. It will be not more than 12. Okay, when you discuss the size, and then you'll start talking about your non-probability sampling. There are people that still are not using this terminology in their submissions. I mean, how many times can I tell you the same thing? So in terms of that, your approach would be non-probability sampling, which means that people don't have an equal opportunity to be selected for the research. And then you will talk about purposive sampling, where you purposively identify a particular individual to interview, and you then ask those individuals that have already been interviewed to recommend other people, which is snowball sampling. So the umbrella term is non-probability sampling. The two sub-elements that you also need to describe would be purposive and then snowball. Insofar as the quantitative people are concerned, okay, just moving forward through the slides. Right, you will use probability sampling, which means that everyone as part of your population has an equal opportunity to be selected to be part of the research. Remember to highlight that. So I would simply just start with this simple random sampling. Don't get fancy, don't get away, don't try and get clever, just use random sampling. It is all here, it is described in the slides. All you need to do is to go and find specific references for this. Right, and then you can see in terms of positivism what your research design is. It is about objectively testing theories. It's about relationships. It's about numbers. It's about stats. In terms of your data collection method, for the positivists, you will be using a questionnaire. You will be doing surveys. So surveys using a particular questionnaire. Those surveys, I did say to you guys, just borrow them from existing scales, existing surveys that sit on the internet. Do not attempt to create your own. Insofar as the positives are concerned, no, let me go back to the qualitative guys here. Your research methodology, and I've given you the extra bits and pieces there. Your data collection will be open-ended interviews. And I see people are doing document analysis. I have no issue with that, but it starts with semi-structured open-ended interviews. In terms of your data collection, I've given you an example of essentially how to describe how you will proceed from your broad qualitative approach in terms of getting the data. And then, yeah, I've given a lot of extra descriptions here. Okay. In terms of the actual interview itself, here is an outline of how to write the interview out. There is your interview protocol. Please just use it and then just give me what and how questions in your interview. So your data analysis method is this here, guys. Just use qualitative content analysis. I've given you the steps there. Just simply rewrite those steps, paraphrase those steps, and add a reference to it. This is not rocket science. And then for quantitative moves, I see you've joined us. Okay. There is your data analysis method. I've given you a very clear outline in terms of doing stats and numbers. In terms of ensuring the quality of research, so from a quantitative perspective, these are your measures of quality: reliability, validity, objectivity. Okay. From a qualitative perspective, your measures of quality are these here. Where are they? It is about trustworthiness and giving me the sub-elements of credibility, transferability, dependability, and conformability. Those are your elements to determine whether you have qualitative research. Insofar as your ethical considerations are concerned, remember, it's about the idea of autonomy, the ability to leave the research at any time, not doing any harm, and that people will benefit from this research. Find Jackie Grant's discussion on this part particular. and then your limitations. And your limitations could be that you're limiting your audience to Pietermaritzburg, that you might not have access to the larger population. Just see what Jackie had written here. And then your contribution will always be a discussion to how you can contribute to policy, practice, and decision making. I am blown away by some of the rubbish that I saw yesterday. And again, when I look at the names here, I am not talking to you. These bloody slides have every single bit in that you need. And I'm getting tense with people now showing me rubbish. Here are the quantitative slides. You will blindly follow what is here. Please just remember, when you put your different documents together from the different submissions, to update your reference list will not update automatically. Right. Let me stop the recording so I can deal with individual questions.